At 4 minutes after midnight on the 4th of July, the research vessel Matahari lost power to a record-setting nor'wester. At 12:16, a hole ripped in her lazarette, and she began to sink. Back before partition, there was a custom up here of celebrating America's independence by firing off your flares at midnight. Even now, plenty of the fleet still keeps the tradition. So, for all the captain tried to get somebody's attention, all the boats must have thought we were just some more states will rise again types, and nobody came. I don't remember much. I remember the sound of my parents bellowing for me through the din before something cracked into my skull. I remember squinting into bright lights and feeling arms pulling my frozen corpse out of the icy sea and fists pummeling the cold brine from my salty lungs.
My lover comes to me with a rose on her bosom. The moon's dancing purple all through her black hair.
Dear Maggie, this morning I realized it's been exactly 2 weeks since my parents' deaths, but I don't know what that means. In the Drake Sea, you don't count time and days. The sun barely sets, and it barely shines. Mostly just sits up bloodless and pale behind the sea fog all day and all night. On the Butcher Boy, we count time in tides, or in tons of catch.
Her skin fits her tightly, and her lips do not lie. She silently slips from her throat.
The work is staggeringly hard, but I'm learning quick, and the first mate Jim's a fine teacher. He's sure no chinwagger. I don't know where he comes from or if he's got a family back home. But I do know why he prefers a water bowline over a standard, and I know his favorite way is to hold a fish pick. And I know he can work 8 hours straight without a break. The skipper's name is Marcus Berg. He's the one that jumped down into the water and saved my life. The other deckhand's his son, Luke, but everyone just calls him Bones. When he was 7, Marcus saw school wasn't doing him any good, so he shanghaied him into throwing crab pots for a season in Jarvik Harbor. Since then, the kid spent more time on sea than on land. He'll have his own boat before he turns 20. Have you ever wondered where salmon come from, Maggie? Years ago, a young girl named Sedna was kidnapped by Raven and taken for his bride. He kept her prisoner on a lonely little island, with only pebbles and eggshells and bits of driftwood for company. The next day, Sedna's father found a long black feather in his daughter's empty bed, and it wasn't hard to guess what had happened. It was common knowledge that Raven stole away young girls and hid them on secret islands. So that night, Sedna's father walked down to the seashore and built a fire on the sand and threw tobacco into the flames. And when the east wind came, he asked her where he might find his daughter, and she told him where to go. He spent the rest of the night in meditation, and when the sun rose, he cleaned his rifle and pushed his kayak out into the waves. He paddled for 3 days and 3 nights before he finally found her. He had a hard time convincing her to come with him. She knew Raven would be back soon and feared his magic. But at her father's command, she got in the boat, and together they raced back over the sea toward the village. Raven arrived to find his new bride missing, and with a hateful shriek, he called a lightning storm down on the little boat, still 100 miles from shore. Sedna's father lost his nerve, and shouting to Raven to spare his life, pushed his daughter overboard so as to return her to her husband. But she refused to go back and clung to the side of the kayak, so he took his axe and chopped off her fingers. She sunk, slowly, to the bottom of the sea, bitter and betrayed, surrounded by the pieces of her hands. Something must have felt the great ache of her loneliness, for before her feet set upon the seafloor, the fingers had changed into little boys and girls who comforted her in her sorrow. When Sedna's mother heard what happened, she slit her cowardly husband's throat and walked down to the sea. She prayed for Sedna to come back to her.
So I reached for her hand, and her eyes turned to poison, and her hair turns to splinters, and her flesh turns to brine.
Though her daughter heard the prayers, she was no longer mortal and could not return to the world of men. So she changed her children into fish and sent them to her people, who caught them in nets and had a feast in her honor. And when they were done, they threw the bones back in the ocean, which floated to Sedna and resumed their former bodies. And ever since, as long as the people respect the mistress of the sea and remember to give the bones of her children back to her, she sends them salmon every summer. We catch fish by the thousands, sometimes mangling to get them out of the nets quick enough, ripping open their eyes and their gills. This is our livelihood. But there isn't a fisherman in Drake's Sea who doesn't give Sedna back her bones. They know the stakes. The ocean's our master, and he can kill us in the blink of an eye. Men disappear every week, they lose their balance and go under, and by the time someone notices, they're gone. The adversity is enough to break anyone's soul. Yet here I persist, soaked in death and blood, listening to the wailing of Sedna's mother on the wind. I haven't slept since the accident. I know if I fall asleep for even a minute, I'll dream of my mother, and then I'll wake up and remember, and my heart might just sputter out and stop beating. But as luck would have it, nobody here sleeps. We throw nets, we fish, we haul, pick, deliver, over and over, tide after tide, like moving through the haze of an opium dream.
Moon's dancing purple all through her black hair, and her ladies in waiting, she'll stand 'neath my window, and the sun will rise soon on the false and the fair. Sing it to Lurelio.
Oh, sing with me a hymn for the light that has dimmed, for the heart that no longer beats. And even until death
I didn't know it, but this whole time I've been waiting for a sign. And tonight, Maggie, it came. I've gone 19 days straight without sleep. Like one of the ancient mariner's ghastly crew, I stood on deck tonight, numbly fixing a buoy line in the August twilight. It's getting dark by midnight now. And Maggie, I don't know if it was the dim light or some waking dream, but I looked down and I thought I saw a rotting fish head hanging around my neck. As I watched, the thing rolled its pupils up and looked at me. With a shout, I ripped it off and threw it on the deck, only to realize it wasn't any fish head, of course, but my mother's present. I hadn't taken it off in years. I made a dive for it, but before I could reach it, I swear to God, Maggie, a tern, an Arctic tern, dropped down and snatched it up in its beak. I screamed and made a lunge for it, but the devil neatly dodged my fingers and shot up into the gloom. I watched it catch a draft of air and streak off southward. I feel naked without it around my neck. It was all I had of hers. Is this coincidence? That the only thing I had of my parents was stolen by the same bird they devoted their lives to studying, and taken to the same place we were headed when they died? When the butcher boy rescued me, I was in too much shock to think what to do, so instead I worked. I worked because I didn't want to kill myself, but now I have a mission. I'm going after the Tern, Maggie. I'm gonna chase him down to Antarctica and take back my birthday gift, or die trying. The sockeye summer is ending. Now we just set our nets and watch them out of one eye while we play chess with the other, breaking every few hours to haul them in and pick out whatever stragglers we caught.
And the sun will never shine on this cold, dead heart of mine.
I told Marcus my plans tonight, and we decided he'd drop me off at Chicanoosh Cannery in 3 days. It's gonna be sad to leave the boys, Bones and Jim and all the other friends we've got out here. It's a family, really, and they welcomed me in. But I've got country to see, and I've got a life to rebuild. Still, I won't forget them.
Coffee and egg, pale winter leg.
I miss you terribly, Maggie. I miss your smile and your dandelion eyes, your ankles and your arms. I don't doubt I'll find you on the road, or you'll find me. But, until then, I'll keep a book of stamps in my back pocket and keep sending you the scribbles of my new life. Marcus gave me the night off, and my eyelids are pulling on my red eyes like lead. I think I'm finally ready to crawl into my little bunk. Sweet dreams, Maggie. Jack.